Welcome back. Now, falling oil prices are changing the economic and strategic balance between oil exporters and their customers. Analysts call the process a major gamble for Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United States, and other major petroleum producers. VOA's Jim Randle reports.
U.S. gasoline prices are at the lowest level in years thanks to falling crude oil prices. Crude prices plunged because slowing economies in Europe and Asia reduced demand for energy, just as surging crude production in the United States increased the oil supply. Too much crude and too little demand complicate the economic and energy landscape for energy producers, according to Elise consulting investment expert James Berkeley, who spoke via Skype.
You can clearly see that some of the producers are playing a game of poker.
In the past, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries coped with falling prices by agreeing to cut production, which limited supplies and boosted prices. But this time, OPEC members did not agree on a deal. Key OPEC member Saudi Arabia can produce oil cheaply and has significant financial reserves. The Saudis may calculate their country can endure low oil prices longer than their economically troubled regional rival Iran, according to LaSalle University professor Edward Terzansky, who spoke via Skype.
The Saudis say, we'll be willing to pay a price for some trouble at home because we know it's going to hit the Iranians much harder.
But low oil prices are also hurting the oil-dependent economies of Venezuela and Russia. Analysts say leaders in Moscow and Caracas have made promises to their people based on budgets that assume far more oil revenue than they're getting now. That may force them to make unpopular choices on where to spend the remaining revenue, possibly weakening their political power. Low oil prices also hurt the profits of U.S. oil producers. But the head of the American Petroleum Institute, Jack Gerard, says they will be saved by innovations and growing efficiency in U.S. oil fields, adding that surging U.S. oil production is boosting U.S. power.
It's changing in a very significant way as the U.S. now wrests control from Russia, from the Middle East and elsewhere, as the world's dominant power in oil and natural gas.
Berkeley says growing U.S. oil production is changing the geopolitical landscape.
I think that that's a really, that is playing out to be the biggest geopolitical and economic issue of this next 3 to 5 years.
Berkeley says it's a safe bet that the struggle over oil prices, energy production, and economic growth will grow more and more intense. Jim Randle, VOA News, Washington.
Well, for more insight into the implications of the drop in global oil prices in African economies, I'm joined by Eugene Nyambal, an economic analyst and author of the book, Creating Prosperity in Africa. Mr. Nyambal, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Now, listening to our story just before that just aired, you get the sense that this is more of a rivalry among nations, oil-producing nations, rather than economic forces kind of setting the price. Or what are we to understand, in a few words?
I think it's both. The first one is geopolitical battle between Saudi Arabia and its Gulf allies and other consumers and producers. We need to bear in mind that Saudi Arabia has a production cost that is lower than its partners. It also has huge reserves at the central bank, about $9 billion. So they're doing it for two reasons. The first one is against Iran and Russia for their involvement in Syria. And the second one is to make sure that the growing U.S. oil producers do not have room to grow.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to the African continent, someone on the streets of Nairobi will be delighted to see the prices going down. I am certainly delighted to see the price going down per gallon. What is the benefit for those who consume, and how does it impact those who produce in Africa, like Nigeria and Angola?
Well, overall in Africa, you have two groups of countries. You have the winners and losers. Winners are countries of East Africa and Southern Africa that are non-oil producers. You take the case of Kenya. Kenya will benefit from low oil prices in the tourism sector because of lower transportation costs. In agribusiness, because they will be able to ship goods to Europe and other locations. And also the average consumer can benefit provided that the government adjusts the prices downward.
So they'll have a little more money to inject into the economy, through purchases of other things.
Yeah. And also in countries like South Africa, they will also benefit in the mining industry and manufacturing, because mining is great oil-consuming industry.
Yes.
So South Africa will be well off. Now the problem, the losers are in West Africa and Central Africa. Take the example of Nigeria. In Nigeria, about 75% of government income comes from the oil sector.
Wow.
The economy is not well diversified. So they will incur budget cuts, and they will have to restructure the economy. You have other countries like Angola, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea. These countries were making good inroads into building new infrastructure, moving forward with the economic development plan. But now,
to a slowdown.
Yeah,
but
they will slow down.
Yeah, one question here. Some people will say, well, countries like Angola, Nigeria could actually perhaps produce a little more and sell to the United States, for example, and forget about Saudi Arabia. Can that create the balance? Angola, Nigeria, selling to the U.S. rather than the U.S. wondering about what Saudi Arabia is doing with their oil?
Well, what we have right now is that the U.S. has become the #1 oil producer in the world. So they have enough spare supply. Mm-hmm. So in the long run, Nigeria and Angola will need to find other customers. They will need to find other markets.
The U.S. is not going to be their market.
The U.S. in the long run will no longer be the key market of these countries, because the U.S. oil industry is growing. Yeah. They're not exporting yet, but they will become a big player in the industry.
Well, Eugene, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
All right. Eugene Nyambal is an economic analyst and author of the book, Creating Prosperity in Africa.